Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of SIG Instrumentation. It is Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. Han, would you like to kick it off today?
Sure. We have a couple of things on the agenda item. The first thing is the annual report. We have this thing in process. The action item is on me, so I will take care of all of the to-dos on here. There's just some links I need to fill in and some checkboxes. But yes, I will get this submitted by the end of the week, and I will probably work on it today. Next on the agenda is Damien's item and Sanchez L.
Yeah, I can kick it off.
That's me, Lars.
Hello.
Yeah, so it's basically like a continuation of what we told during the last triage session, where basically like we had this problem with Luis where we wanted to update the stable metric, like basically just add a new label to it, or maybe a bit more than one, but add a couple label.
You can't update stable metrics. That's not what stable means.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But the idea is like, how can we achieve that then? Like, since we cannot update this metric, like, how can we achieve like just adding a new label to an already stable metric? And the suggestion that Han proposed last time was to like just add a new metric with the new label. That said, the issue that I have with that is that like there are a couple of ways where we can proceed. Like we can keep the same name, but then the API would be different, but that's a bit like complex to use.
I don't think you can keep the same name because it's a different metric.
Yeah, but we can. Like since the labels are different, there won't be any conflict.
No. Prometheus won't allow that.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Are you sure? I'm pretty sure we can.
Pretty sure you can't. Because then you would have two sets of metrics with two different sets of labels. Prometheus would not know what to do with that.
And
we can actually because since the labels are different, like they are treated as like two different kind of metrics, like they are not the same.
They would have the same name, so when you create the metric, then you'd get both. So I don't think that would work.
The advisor ran into this once upon a time where we accidentally.
Oh, yes. Yeah, C advisor was admitting metrics with different labels depending on whether or not labels were present, and it caused a lot of problems for people who were scraping them.
It'll drop one step. So metrics were coming and going because it randomly selected one of the two sets of labels to keep and the other one to drop.
That's why you use must register instead of register.
I don't remember. That sounds right. Yeah.
The issue is that if we have to come in place with a new naming for this new metric, then it's problematic. Like it's harder to use because it will be harder to discover, harder to comprehend like the difference between like the existing metric and the new one. Like as a user, it will be hard to really understand like which one is the latest and which one is now recommended to be used.
Well, I think it was maybe a mistake to make this a stable metric if there was a desire to later add labels to it, because stable means you can never change it. You can't add labels. You can't do anything. Like it's stable. It is not going to change. That's what stable means. Not like, yay, it's good. It's graduated. That's not what stable means. And we do have a proposal to maybe change that naming so people aren't like mistaking it for GA. But stable means the metric will not change. So if you want to change it later, you basically have to like go through the year-plus long deprecation process to remove it completely. And then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, but I mentioned that like now like there is this discussion about like keeping all the stable, everything that is stable, keeping it in Kubernetes, like not removing it at all.
Like forever.
Yeah.
Yes, that is like a thing.
That's not a possibility anymore.
So one, we can't change the existing stable metric. We just can't do that because like then our stability is like not really stable. Like and then what is this machinery for? Like creating a new metric is fine. I would keep it in alpha for a while. See if you like need to add new dimensions to it or whatever. After it bakes for a really long time, I would consider promoting that to stable and deprecating the old one.
But then it will break kind of like what Jordan was trying to introduce to not.
Well, the
deprecate
forever
any
thing,
stable.
is contentious for sure.
Yeah,
And
we haven't agreed that we want it to be a forever thing.
Exactly. So while Jordan is pushing for that, it is not uncontentious, and therefore arguments can be made against it. But I suggest doing it the right way, which is like introducing a new metric with the new dimensions that you want, baking it.
Did anyone else just lose Han?
Yeah, we just lost
Yeah,
Han.
we just done.
I mean,
We'll give him a moment to come back.
Yeah, okay.
Han, you froze for a moment there.
I thought everyone else was frozen.
No.
Yeah. So what I was saying is like we should do it the right way, right? Which is bake the new metric for a really long time, and only proposing the swap after we are super certain that we're never going to add labels again.
By swap, do you mean like replacing the labels in the stable one by the?
No, we mean like deprecate the stable
and promote,
metric and make the new one stable.
Yes, that's what I mean by swap.
So basically, we won't be able to reuse the name of the original.
Correct.
We will not be able to
the
reuse
stability
the name.
guarantee.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is kind of annoying to me because, like, to me, the name of the metric is like currently the only way we have to easily discover what it is doing.
I get that it's annoying, but like literally, there's nothing you can do about this. There's
there's like to figure out like potential solution that we
I mean, the solution is if this was missing labels, it never should have become stable. Like that is stable means it's not going to change. If there was confusion around what stable meant, such that people proposed it for stable and like thought they were going to add like labels to it later, like maybe we need to update documentation or something to disabuse people of that notion. But like stable means it will never change.
I am not convinced it's even a great idea to add these labels, because these are really high cardinality labels, and like we are
trying to bound them.
No, and so like so the thing about these labels is like, if you bind them, then I think it's probably fine. CRDs, because CRDs obviously will cause.
Yeah, basically there was an issue where it was exploding. Hence why like we're trying to reintroduce them, but with an actual like way to bound them. So I think Luis was working on like an allow list for the label at the webhook level. To kind of specify like which resources are critical and which one we want to have dedicated SLOs for. So basically having SLOs per resource compared to like having one SLO for all the webhooks. So that's
why not call one SLO webhook admission duration seconds or something? Webhook duration SLO.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that.
I mean, that sounds fine to me.
Like similar to what we did for GPA server duration.
Yeah, I mean, just an SLO metric. I think that's fine.
Okay.
And if you bind it, then the cardinality should be limited. And so you shouldn't even have to worry that much, practically speaking, about increasing the number of time series.
Yeah. I think just like I wanted to see like if you had some way to leverage like the name change or not, but yeah, it seems that we don't.
No.
Okay, so that's
fine. Luis, do you have any questions for us? Welcome to SIG Instrumentation. We're always this excited around here.
Oh, well, thanks. My first time on this call thanks Damien for introducing me and trying to help me work through this. As an observer or first time here, I did find it, a couple comments. First, of course, your discussion of stable. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Damien, part of the questioning of stable is more of, other actual changes that are compatible, even if you're stable. And I think we must have just been incorrect thinking that it was possible to add a label without disrupting existing use of the metric.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a compatible API change for labels on metrics. Like once a metric becomes stable, it will never change. Because there's no way, I mean, across minor boundaries of releases, maybe we could add labels in terms of like just how API guarantees generally work. Like that would be consistent at least with them, but it's totally possible to have components on different versions, like with a version skew within a cluster, and therefore that would break. So like, because you could be scraping two different components with two different versions, and then they'd have different sets of labels. And so that's why those stability guarantees are very important. It's not like a compatible API change within the API server where, you know, if the thing doesn't exist, it's never going to get serialized. And the API server always must be ahead of the other component version. So like everything is okay. It's not like that for Prometheus metrics. So that's why we have these rules.
It helps to think of it in terms of a database table. Like if you add a column to a database table, right? Or if you try to emit, like create a row in a database with a non-existent column, right? That's going to explode. But if you try to create a row in a database and omit one of the columns, that's actually a valid SQL statement, right? Like you can insert without specifying all of the columns.
Yeah,
so
well
it works
Han,
almost exactly the same way.
For etcd though, like it's like we have the concept within API review of a compatible API change where like we've added a new nullable field, right? And that's fine between versions. But the fundamental issue with metrics, why we cannot add, there's no such thing as a compatible API change, is because you could be running two components on different miners in the same cluster, both being scraped by the same Prometheus. And if they're on different minor versions and they have different labels, then like they're not, the metrics aren't compatible. So like that's the fundamental issue, is you can't have like a nullable label in Prometheus.
That's not strictly true. You can remove a label.
Oh yeah, you could drop it at the scrape level, but then it's
still
no.
Even at the emission level, you can drop a label and it will just populate with a null value in Prometheus. It will actually work, but it will break alerts that presume the existence of that.
You could emit a null value for the new thing, but for old versions that have no knowledge of these changes, the previous miner, they're not changing anything in terms of how they're emitting that metric. So it's not possible.
You can't, Prometheus can still take a subset of labels. I'm like pretty certain.
No, what I'm saying is you can't do it and make zero changes to your deployment. Like you'd have to drop labels somewhere, or like you'd have to change how things are deployed. You can't just be like, I have this component, it has this metric with this name, it has this set of labels, and I have the new version and it has this set of labels plus one, and you throw those into a cluster, and then you scrape both targets, like, and then you query for the time series in Prometheus without doing additional things. They're not going to be referenceable, right? You've got one with like these labels, which are different than these ones, which is the problem that we're trying to avoid. The problem that we saw with C Advisor randomly emitting different sets of labels and whatnot. This is why I'm saying I don't think we can ever have a case. It's not like an API, compatible API change where you can just add a field that happens to be nullable. We can just pretend that it didn't exist in the previous version.
No, yeah, you can't add ever, but you can drop. And that should be fine, except it will break alerts.
Okay. The other thought I had was then, it looks like the way to evolve metrics are basically create a new one with a completely different name and eventually drop the old one. It doesn't seem like there's a facility really within Prometheus to handle it any other way. Is there anything we can do in the future to make this more obvious, or for example, like require a version suffix or something on each metric name in the future, so that at least the users is very aware of exactly what version he's using, and if he sees a V2, for example, he knows, hey, do I need to move over to V2? What's this over here? Is it offering me more value?
I think that's against the Prometheus naming guidelines. Like I've never seen versions embedded in metric names before. I think there's a bit of an issue where like Prometheus, I think as a community hasn't really like considered this sort of scale, or because I filed issues against them previously asking, for example, like, can you add a facility to rename metrics? Because that would be very useful for us, like to be able to declare, hey, I know that this metric said like one thing in this last release, but now we've renamed it and it used to be called this thing. Can you consider them to be the same thing at scrape time? And I filed an issue requesting that as a feature and was basically told, no, like, why would you ever want that? That sounds bad. And it's like, well, like in Kubernetes, we have all this like versioning issues with like metrics, and maybe we're just a very particular special use case. And so they consider like that sort of request to be well, it's just going to affect Kubernetes. It's not going to affect anyone else. I'm not sure. Yeah, that is unfortunately like sort of the response we've gotten back from them. So given that there's not really necessarily like people setting the standards in like our dependency Prometheus for like how we maybe should be doing this, we're kind of on our own. And so we're making it up as we go along, but we're trying to do it in a way that works. I think it might be good for us to write clearer dev documentation if there are any concerns about like what it means to be a stable metric, and like warning big flashing letters, you know, like if you make it stable, you cannot change the labels on it. You cannot change its name. You cannot change the labels. Like it is stuck like this forever until we remove it. So
you can always use something in the namespace, like hit like the option struct that allows you to construct the metric definition has several fields: namespace, subsystem, name. And subsystem is like the component. Namespace you could theoretically use as like V2 or whatever. Like this is not like just because the Prometheus community has not said anything like in our case, I feel like it's probably fine if you want to do something like that, like repurposing the namespace field to add, like what happens is subsystem namespace and the name get concatenated together to form the metric name. So if you wanted to do something like that, I think that would be fine.
So again, just as an observer trying to do this time, I just wondered if there was something. I understand that Prometheus itself doesn't have any facility, but if it something to consider for Cube, if there was a way to, as you mentioned, for example, use a namespace field, and for Cube we include like a a -v1 or something similar, to give at least Cube more flexibility in the future.
Yeah, I don't think we should try putting random versions into metrics because they're not going to be meaningful on a project-wide basis. Like effectively, I think each component owner is going to be coming up with their own versioning. I think that'll be very confusing to end users, particularly because we don't currently have documentation of all of the metrics emitted by Kubernetes. And so like then throwing things like effectively all they've got is like the help text that come along with the metric. That's the only documentation we have. So like adding versioning stuff that we don't have any docs for on top of that, I don't think will be a very good user experience.
Okay. I mean, yeah, definitely we need to have that stuff documented with all of the component metric stuff. I mean, that was part of one of our goals earlier on. And yeah, we should move forward to that in the next cycle if we can.
Con, I had a question for you based on something that you said earlier.
Sure.
So specifically when I was talking about like API, like compatible API changes, typically what that means in Kubernetes is you have some serializable type. And the only compatible changes that you can make to that are you can add new fields that are nullable. You can't take away fields because that would break things. And so when I was saying we can't add metrics because the fields wouldn't exist on the old metric, and you said, well, you could maybe drop fields and then just emit that as a null field. That wouldn't be considered a compatible API change from a Kubernetes API point of view, which is why I wasn't considering that.
Yeah, yes. So like,
Is it possible to drop labels from
yes,
metrics
yes,
that
it
are
is
stable?
no, it's not okay from a process and rules perspective. We don't allow this because we don't allow this, not because it will break ingestion. It will not break ingestion. It is, in fact, API compatible with ingestion to drop a label.
Yes, I wasn't suggesting dropping a label though. I was saying adding a label is the issue.
No, adding a label is not API compatible.
That's what I was saying.
Yes.
Adding in this case, we weren't suggesting dropping labels, right? Like in this case, they wanted to add a couple of labels.
Yes.
And I said, well, isn't that API compatible? And I'm saying, no, it's not API compatible because if you have two different components in the same cluster that are both emitting metrics, one's on the old version, one's on the new version has an extra label. We now have a mismatch. If we had dropped the label, i.e., the old one had whatever, and then the new one just emitted a nullable thing, that would be fine, but that wouldn't be considered a compatible API change.
No. So what I'm saying is, let's say you have a metric with 3 labels.
Yes.
And then you remove one of the labels going into version 2, like another.
No. I understand that that's fine.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I was talking about, because that's like definitely not considered a compatible API change from like a Kubernetes API compatibility perspective.
But from a Prometheus ingestion perspective, it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine from Prometheus's point of view, but it's not something that we permit per the metric stability policy.
Yes.
And like we can't, but the comparison I was making was not can Prometheus do it? It was, would like the equivalent of a compatible API change exist in the world of metrics? Like, is it okay to just go and add a label later if you decide, well, I have the stable thing and I want to like add this thing? Because in the world of like Kubernetes API types, that's fine. In the world of Prometheus, that is not fine. Only adding, like dropping wouldn't be considered compatible. So like I wasn't even considering that. It turns out, yes, that might be fine, but we wouldn't ever do it in the case of a stable metric because somebody might be alerting on that thing and be like, where's my label?
So Luis, are you on the API machinery team? You are?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Well, yeah, go ahead, continue, sorry.
So yeah, I mean, like the component owners are supposed to like own the metrics. Like personally, I was on board with promoting the webhook thing to stable. And I work on API machinery stuff. Like personally, I wouldn't have thought that we would have ever wanted to add resource labels to this metric, mostly because of cardinality issues. So, I mean, like what would almost make more sense is to create like a separate SLO metric if you want to measure SLO stuff, and like not even include all of the labels that you may have on the original webhook. Maybe just make it a completely different one that measures exactly what you need for your SLO.
Sure, yeah, we'll look into that. And the thing is, if you look into this metrics history, the labels have been added and removed in the past.
They have, but they've been stable. They've been stable for like at least 3 or 4 cycles before we made it stable. That's why we did it. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that sounds reasonable, and we'll go with that.
Cool.
Yeah, and just to add, I think it's hard to catch like for components owner, like to know whether they would need at some point to add labels or not, because like they might not have like alerting awareness to some certain point. Like they might not know how to really like create SLOs or even like create good alerting. So they might need a label at some point that they don't have yet. And I don't think like even for us, like it's hard to really project in the future. Like since for us, like we don't have the knowledge about the component itself, it's also hard to really like try to recommend some changes or whatever.
Yeah.
We
in our
sorry, I just not to interrupt. We have 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to think maybe if there are some action items that we could take away from this discussion. One thing that I think would be good is to make sure that our documentation and guidelines are clear. Another thing that we might want to consider doing is like adding something to Prow that when it sees something happening in the stable metrics folder, like pops up with a little comment being like, you are changing stable metrics, like here's the documentation for that, because we don't have anything like that currently.
Well, no, we have hack things. So if someone tries to change a stable
No,
metric,
I know it'll prevent them until somebody from SIG Instrumentation approves it. But I'm saying like for the author, we don't have like a little like comment pop up in the same way that like if you change something and there's a label applied for API review, it'll be like, this PR may need API review. Please see this documentation. We don't have anything like that for stable metrics.
yeah, we can just add this to the shell script. So like before you even get to prow, you will get a failed hack thing. So like your hack script, if you run it, verify stable metrics. Yeah, we can just add a message that says, here, you can't change the stable metric.
I think it just might be a little bit more user friendly to do it as a comment on the PR, because otherwise people are only going to see it if they look at the output of the verified job. And it's not going to be clear to example, like people who aren't expecting verify to fail that like, oh, by the way, this is a thing that's been changed. And
there are
like, here's the
100
docs for it.
verify scripts. There's like 100 verify
No, that's what I'm
scripts.
saying. There's like a lot of those scripts. So like
You have to check the verify scripts. Like
I just want to mention.
Yeah.
I just want to mention there's also a handy script which just makes it go away. So
the generate,
you know, that
updates
without warning you. It just says, okay, you wanted to update the stable metrics.
Yeah, but no one will approve it.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying as soon as those things change, I think it might be a little bit more user friendly to maybe see when we have something like that come up, that we go ahead and like alert the user and have the comment on there so that like somebody maybe with top level approver who doesn't know about stable metrics or whatever is like, oh, there's a stable metric change. I need to talk to instrumentation or whatever. Because I don't know if that folder, for example, uses like no inherit like parent owners or anything like that.
I got to run to another meeting, but good action items. We should add some stuff to the hack scripts in order to provide more detailed information. Also, the warning about not running the generate stable metrics thing or the implications of that, I think is a good call.
Okay. Thanks everyone for joining today.
Right.
You got to go. We're 1 minute over.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.